What are you doing?
Oh, I'm just cutting a chocolate bar.
Why?
Because we're talking about the Dawn Shards today.
Can I eat it?
No, do not get it wet! Sule! One of the most interesting mysteries of the COSMERE is what powers, if any, might exist outside of Aether. Today, I want to dive into the 12 Aethers. Well, not literally, I do like living. We'll talk about what, or rather who they are, where we've seen them, and what they may just mean for the COSMERE as a whole. Today, we have spoilers for the Lost Metal, Tress of the Emerald Sea, and minor spoilers for Shadows for Silence and White Sand. Statistically speaking, 70% of you watching right now are not subscribed, which is absurd. What are you waiting for? When the Lost Metal dropped in 2022, we finally met the Scadrian Ghostbloods. One of these members introduced us to a whole new magic system, religion, and planet. I am talking about, of course, codenamed Twinsoul, whose real name is Prasanva. Twinsoul is an elderly human from the planet Datri, who, at the time of the Lost Metal, was on Scadrial to help Kelsier with his autonomy problem. Twinsoul is a unique Ghostblood, as he is what is called an Aetherbound. Basically, a person gifted a piece of one of the 12 Primal Aethers. He keeps the Aether in the palm of his hand. No, literally. I wonder if it gets itchy. Here's a conversation between Marasi, Moonlight, and Twinsoul that explains this relationship in better detail. From the Lost Metal, chapter 42. Silajana? Marasi said, trying to form the unfamiliar sounds. That is your god? Both less and more than a god, he explained. Silajana is one of the Primal Aethers. They predate Aether, you know, and exist outside of his power. They predate the Shattering, Moonlight said. That doesn't mean they predate Aether. To my people, this is a sacred tenet, he said to Marasi, ignoring Moonlight. The Primal Aethers grant some people a bud of their core. This bud connects me to Silajana, he continued, and through him to all of his other Aetherbound. He is the core, and we his web. He is eternal, and we his mortal agents in the COSMERE. First of all, I'm not really certain what it means for the Aethers to be both less and more than a god. More than a shard, but less than Aether. More than Aether, but less than the god beyond. I guess the jury is still out on that one. Regardless, this relationship sounds eerily similar to a shard investing a human, almost like the creation of an avatar. This is a little different, of course, as there seems to be a very physical piece, a bud, from the Aether's core that must be attached to the Aetherbound's body. Not only that, but Twinsoul describes his relationship to all the other Aetherbounds with a bud from Silajana as a web. Now that I think about it, this kinda sounds a little similar to the Iriali god, the One, who split themselves into many so they could experience the world. Maybe there's a theory in there somewhere. Back on topic, we also learned that these Primal Aethers predate the Shattering, which is agreed upon by both Moonlight and Twinsoul. It's possible they may even exist outside of Big A, and we'll talk more about that later, but regardless, they still seem sort of shardy. Ew, no, shardic is definitely the right word there, sorry. Even the method Twinsoul uses to access his powers is used by shards. Silajana is specifically the Rosite Primal Aether, and this connection gives Twinsoul the ability to manipulate Rosite crystals. By offering water through a Luhel bond, Twinsoul is able to summon the crystals to support his old man joints, grow functional crystal reading spectacles, and even form a bulletproof crystal exoskeleton like a mech suit. While this isn't the Nahel bond we're used to seeing with Honor and Cultivation's Truespren, the Luhel bond is the same mechanism we see with Sand Mastery in White Sand, Autonomy's magic system. What this shows us is that while the etheric powers are new to us, the method by which these powers are accessed are something we have already seen before. This may just mean that all COSMERE investiture is accessed through fundamental means, but it at least shows us that the Aethers aren't completely independent from the system we're already familiar with. Later in chapter 51 of Lost Metal, Twinsoul explains to his enemies that his Primal Aether has gifted them their current reincarnations, and by defying Twinsoul, they may not be given rebirth again for many centuries. Clearly, this is religious talk of some sort, but it might actually imply that the Aethers grant some form of reincarnation. If that is the case, would they actually grant this rebirth to Scadrians? Unfortunately, we still barely know what these Aethers are, let alone what rebirth could actually be. We do, however, have Tress of the Emerald Sea to give us some more insight into the nature of these Aethers. If you need a refresher on the book, check out our 10-minute summary here. In this book, we learn that the planet Lumar has 12 moons that are each inhabited by a unique strain of the 12 Primal Aethers. These Aethers, called Prime Aethers, which is not confusing at all, are particularly thirsty and rabid, according to Hoyt. These Aethers decided to propagate themselves by raining Aether spores onto the planet. Each of these spores, spores, when exposed to water, manifest the aether they represent. The ones we know of so far are as follows. The verdant aether makes vines, the rosite aether makes rosite crystal, the zephyr aether makes wind, the crimson aether makes razor sharp spines, the sunlight aether makes light and heat, and the midnight aether makes midnight essence creatures. Yes, the same midnight essence that Ray Shafir controls, which is yet another similarity to the Aether based magics. There are 6 more aethers we don't know anything about yet, but we do know that each of these 12 prime aethers came from the Primal Aethers. Another interesting note is that much like how the Shades of Threnody are injured or killed by silver, the aethers are also killed by silver. Silver kills the spores and the manifested aether from those spores. Both turn gray when touched by the silver, and at least the spores can be killed by salt. Yes, the Shades are largely a mystery as well, but there's clearly a connection between the two. Interestingly enough, silver's influence on the spores can be mitigated by aluminum. Yes, the same metal that mitigates investiture. Aethers also react to steel and iron, allowing the metals to push and pull the direction the aethers grow from the spores. Yes, this likely suggests that other metals can affect the aethers as well. Not only can metals affect the aethers, but check out this passage from chapter 44 of Tress of the Emerald Sea. Tress noticed the ends of the vines were still growing. As before, when she thought about them, they turned toward her. In this particular case, she didn't want them to constrict her further, and so she thought of them pulling away. Remarkably, they did. It wasn't perfect control. Plus, she couldn't do anything about the already grown vines and had to use the knife to cut herself free, but it left her wondering how far her control could go. So it seems that a non-aether bound person can also control the aethers with their mind. To a degree. Granted, Tress was a budding sprouter, pun definitely intended, and she spent a lot of time with the spores, which no doubt connected her to them more than the average person. Still, she is no aether bound, meaning she did not have a bud of the verdant aether within her, so that could not allow her to control it with a Luhel bond. She could simply use raw intent alongside her growing connection. Speaking of having a bud of the verdant aether within you, we met jolly old Captain Crow in Tress of the Emerald Sea as well. She is, in fact, a Spore Eater. This means that she has a manifestation of the verdant aether inside of her. Since this came from the really angry and thirsty prime aethers, all it wants is water, which makes Crow very thirsty. This isn't all bad for her though, as the verdant aether that resides in Crow prevented her from putting a bullet in her own face, something that she seemingly couldn't bypass even if she tried. It appears that this is a part of the prime aether's goal in collecting water through its host, as it does seem to be quite difficult to get water when your host ceases to be alive. There is one more mysterious and important thing to note. The Dark Aether. No, I didn't make that up. In chapter 47 of the Lost Metal, Twin Soul states this, "But my homeland is inhospitable to my kind for now. I joined Lord Kelsier for the opportunity to gain allies and resources for my eventual fight against the Dark Aether." Apparently, all is not well on Twin Soul's home world of Daughtry. This Dark Aether is not something we've encountered in any other novel. Well, at least not that I'm aware of. Twin Soul hints that the war on his planet has scoured it, leaving it inhospitable. This creature could just be the Midnight Primal Aether, or could it be the super secret 13th Aether? So, how about a theory? You see, it's very interesting to us here at Lightcallers that the origins of these Aethers are completely contested in the COSMERE. In a 2022 Words of Brandon, he gives us a cryptic lore drop.
PageRunner17 says, if a well-studied singer were to become an aetherbound, how would they, with their innate understanding of tones, evaluate the core aether's claim to be independent of Adenalcium and the shards?
They would not have enough experience with the COSMERE in general to be able to say yes or no. How about this? If they went to all the different tones and compared them, they would find something different happening with the aethers, I think is what the question is getting at. So there is some evidence cosmologically for the aether's claims to be independent of Adenalcium. There are also evidences that Arcanus could put forward that say otherwise.
So, the Aethers are different from not only the shards, but even the ancient spren of Roshar created by Adenalcium himself. There is certainly a difference between the Aethers and the manifestation of Adenalcium's shards that we've seen. What does this mean? Well, we still have very limited information about the origins of the Aethers and their relationship to Adenalcium. And yes, Brandon has intentionally raffoed almost everything related to the Aethers, as they are going to be important to the future era era of the COSMERE. But to have some fun, I'm still going to leave you with a fun theory. Let's consider that the Aethers were once a single entity at least as powerful as Aether that existed in the COSMERE before Aether used the Dawn Shards. When Big A used the Dawn Shards to create the COSMERE proper, he also altered this Primal Aether. It was split into 12 sub-Aethers, very notably a division of 4, and these were given sentience, much like the Spren of Roshar in the Scions of Sel, splinters of Aether. They were either already on Datri or intentionally moved there to be far away from Aether own creations. Maybe Aether was even scared of them himself. I think the Aethers, as we know them, were an accident, or maybe an experiment of the Dawn Shard's power. This is primarily based off of that Brandon quote I just shared. If given all of the relevant information, a singer would know that there is something different about the Aethers. At the same time, other arcanists would disagree with this conclusion, meaning that there is a ton of evidence for both sides of the argument. What I think this means is that Aether corrupted an already existing entity, his unmade, if you will. The Dawn Shard pulled this primal being into 12 categories based on the commands, a foreshadowing of what would happen to Aether himself. If you haven't already, you can check out our theory on the shattering here. Okay, I know this theory was more speculative than usual, but I mean, that's just the nature of the Aethers right now. So what do you think? Is the Dark Aether something sinister, or is it already one of the 12? Did the 12 Primal Aethers predate Aether or did Aether create them? Is Hoid's head full of Zephyr spores? Yeah, let us know what you think in the comments below. Kolo